Notes.
Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 793, the French Grand Prix review. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know how we do race reviews, don't you?
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before doing that, of course, I have to introduce my guest. But folks, I got to tell you, most of you know him as the international Paul Charsley. Some of our French listeners know him as Paul Labousse Charsley. But he happens to be all the way over to his motherland, nestled. You would think London, the heart of London. No. Paul didn't feel like going and patronizing a bunch of Londoners. Where would Paul go when he goes to the UK? He went to Kent.
Kent, baby.
You are
yes.
in Kent.
The
How awesome
principality
is that?
known as Kent. Yes.
Oh, man. Are they keeping it real in Kent?
It's, you know it.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like it.
We've got a lot of love for all of our Kentian listeners.
Well, yeah, a lot of my family are from Kent. Most of them, in fact. So,
Most of your family from Kent.
Yeah, so that's why I'm stopping on my way to Spa. So I did, a little visitation, visit the old homestead. They haven't built a museum for me yet, though. That's a shame.
Oh,
someone's still living there. So anyway.
I thought maybe they'd take your old home. I saw, if you follow Paul on social media, you'll see like a travel log, right? Yeah. So he's like hanging out with his British friends who are driving American pickups, which is cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
And
that's
then
Lee. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Him and his son Harry listen to the podcast.
Oh, cool. Hey, Lee. Hey, Harry. And then he had a picture of the old birthplace of Paul. I was surprised they haven't turned that into the Paul Charsley Racing Museum with all your trophies and helmets and stuff. But
that would just kind of cover the front porch area, unfortunately. But yeah.
It's the front porch area. That's good.
That's fun.
Yeah, cool. That's very cool. Have you had a good Cornish pasty yet?
No, I did have a good Indian though tonight.
I knew you would.
I tell you, man, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, it's required by law.
I was walking around looking for my Welcome to Kent sign, and I spied a very good-looking Indian restaurant, and popped in there, got myself some garlic naan and some tikka masala, and ate it up.
Right.
Yes.
I know. So, being British, if you didn't go there, it's required by law that you have to eat Indian food. A good curry over there, or Detective Constable Morsel arrest you.
But I was at a quandary, because I passed a fish and chip shop also. It was 2 doors down. I was like, okay, Indian wins again.
See, I totally would have went fish and chips, but
yeah, you probably would, and it would have been a good choice. It would have been a good choice. Good. So I did that, and then I met up with my cousins, my fun cousins. So,
cool.
Joanne, Emma, and Andrew, and my uncle John. So
they still remember you?
Yeah, they did actually.
Yeah,
oddly enough, the whole family is not just my brother and my dad, but my whole family are involved in racing. My cousin Andrew was a very good Formula car driver, and Joanne's son is also a Formula car driver. So it's staying, the racing veins are still throbbing well there in Charsley Land and in Kent.
And in Kent, yes, the epicenter of the Charsley family racing.
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. Love it. Very cool. Well, you're very gracious to stay up late because I know you're, I'm -6 from you, so you're staying up late, very late. What beer did you have tonight?
I had London Pride.
London Pride, was it good?
Yeah, it's good.
Good.
It was the first beer I had when I landed. I haven't had that many, but it's the shocker that it's not ice cold like I've become used to, but. After about a couple of sips, you're like, yeah, that's right.
So was it room temperature?
No, but it's not ice cold, right? So it's cool. I would call it cool.
Cool. But in America, we drink it cold.
Yes, you need ice cold.
Yeah.
Bud Light.
Bud Light. No. No. Oh boy. What did you manage in all of the hustle and bustle and flight to the UK and time difference and jet lag, preparing for the 24 hours of Spa, which is going to be awesome next weekend for the hard racing team? Did you manage to get the French Grand Prix watched?
I did, yeah. I watched a bit of practice. I watched the quali. I watched the race. So,
good. All right. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
What the hell?
I can keep talking about how delicious my naan bread was, but I don't think people want to hear about that. That's for the other podcast.
It is, definitely the other podcast. Grace would appreciate that. It's lost on me. All right, let's talk about the French Grand Prix, shall we? We all go home to where it all started back in the early 1900s. That is France, the originator of Grand Prix racing. And we go back to not the originator of the track, mind you. This would be Paul Ricard circuit in the south of France. And, heading into this weekend, let's do a little table setting, shall we?
Okay.
Make sure the forks are on the right side. So heading into this weekend, Mercedes, as well as many pundits in the press, I might add, were convinced that the Paul Ricard track would flatter their pace. And with some of the, there was news reports, saying, hey, Mercedes may, come into here with the pace to actually win this race and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I read that. And I was like, I don't know about that, but, okay. But on Friday, that dream seemed to be far-reaching at best, and Saturday kind of confirmed it. But to Lewis's credit, he managed to wring the neck of that Mercedes, get it into P4 in qualifying, and this meant that both he and George, all they were waiting for was an error ahead of him, and it would be a podium, right? But still, even after qualifying, kind of suggested that those Mercs are maybe around 7/10 off the Red Bull and Ferrari. But be that as it may, a great qualifying effort by them. But what may have been more intriguing was that Red Bull knew that the heat and the track temps were going to be really warm over the weekend. So they went with that low downforce setup and favored that straight line speed so as not to degrade their tires with a lot of downforce, right? So they were hedging their bets on that straight line speed. Ferrari were sort of the opposite. They had more pace over one lap, of course, with Charles Leclerc putting it on pole. But, it was going to come down to that long run pace, I think, is regardless of kind of how it played out on Saturday. I kind of still thought Max is still in there. He's got Perez right behind him. There's only one Ferrari ahead of him. It was really going to come down to who could manage those tires and make that last. Anyway, that's what I thought heading into the race.
I'm not sure you'd run low downforce to save the tires. And
I think
the higher downforce will take care of the tires more generally.
Yeah. I was thinking, well, maybe they were favoring sort of low downforce, maybe thinking that they'd make most of their time up on the long straights and not have to really.
A car with a car with low downforce is more raceable. Even if you've got the speed in the corners, you have to work and make sure you're perfect there. Whereas on a straightaway, that's consistent every lap, right? But if you're trying to eke out those last little tenths in the corners because you've got a bit more extra grip, you've got to still work for it a little bit harder. So a car in a straight line may not be the fastest car, but it can actually keep ahead because it's more raceable.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it looked like in qualifying anyway for that Ferrari. Because I was thinking maybe that's why Red Bull, they favored that straight line speed, trying not to claw out a bunch of gains in the corners and slow speed stuff. And they were hoping that straight line would kind of see him through, and possibly hoping on that sort of traditional notion that maybe Ferrari was going to get a lot more heat in their tires, being that a lot of their pace was really in those corners, not so much in that long straight. But, as such, it was also interesting that regardless of how they finished in qualifying, they entered that race then with Red Bull with two sets of hards, and Ferrari had two mediums, right? And so I kind of think that was kind of the talking point for me anyway, heading into the race. How is that going to play out in both team strategies? Whereas Ferrari had two mediums, Red Bull had two hards. Was it a one-stopper? Was it going to be a two-stopper? I think for Red Bull heading in thinking definitely a one-stopper with that hard compound they had on option. So as it turns out, Red Bull won the race with Max Verstappen in P1, Sergio down in P4. I think Red Bull reckoned that Ferrari might experience some of that tire wear that they had earlier in the season. That seems to be the conventional theory anyway. And so at the start, Max slotted in behind Charles, was pushing Charles pretty hard early on. And my thinking here was that must be Max trying to really put a lot of pressure on Ferrari, get Charles to really overheat, to cook those tires a little bit.
Yeah.
But it didn't really work. And Ferrari seemed to actually be in pretty good form. Charles holding off Max, doing a pretty good job. Didn't really see those tires instantly going off on those Ferraris anyway. As a matter of fact, in a front limited track, it was Max tires that started to give up and overheat, he said. And so they came in early, put those hard compounds on. And at this point, I was thinking, well, then the Red Bull gamble may not play out given Ferrari's pace and tire management. But in reality, I was watching that and thinking, at that point, Red Bull knew the undercut was powerful here, and because they extended that pit lane, right? And so when they put those hards on, I kind of reckon that Red Bull knew they could box on lap 16, run to the end of the race as long as their in and out lap was good, which it was. Yeah. And that may have meant that move alone pretty much had Charles and Ferrari on the ropes, as the undercut was going to work at that point. They had that delta. I think, he was 28, 29 seconds to Charles. And I feel like as much as Charles threw it off the island, I kind of felt like that early stop, hards, knowing Ferrari is going to be on the soft. At least that's what I was thinking when it unfolded.
Yeah, it would have been fun to see it all work out, naturally rather than with Charles's mistake, because it was intriguing. Yeah. I think Red Bull were banking on leading.
Yeah.
Because if you got that downforce setting and you're in the lead, it makes you less threatened by DRS, right? So you can always hold people up in the corners if you want to.
Yeah.
But as we saw with the Red Bull coming on strong, I think they banked on either Max being on pole or being able to get by Charles early and then just kind of control it from the front. But they didn't get to do that. And that's when it became intriguing with where Max kind of started falling back just a little bit when you really after he had a couple of big goes at it.
Yeah, he did.
He never got the job done. So I still think, in my mind, I feel like Ferrari probably still should have won this race with the strategies and when people are pitting, etc. But Max's control at the front would have been interesting to see how Charles would have had to deal with that, trying to attack Max when Max has obviously got quite a head of steam on the straightaways to keep him up.
I was just thinking, because that pit lane delta was 28 seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching Max when he boxed early on lap 16 for hards. I mean, he was there already, he was under that. And I don't know. I just felt like, boy, it's going to be a very close run thing. No matter what happens, it was going to be a close run thing for sure, right? So as you said, the epic strategy battle unfortunately didn't really materialize because Charles crashed out. And this left Max effectively at that point to manage the remainder of that race, keeping that 5-10 second gap. I think he finished just about 10 seconds ahead of Lewis in the end. But at that point, he's managed his entires, managing that race, goes on to take the win. Oddly, though, Paul, Sergio had a tough weekend. Friday,
weekend is the word. Tough weekend.
Yeah. I mean, Friday he looked a tad slow. But like the Merc, I think on Saturday he managed to at least pull it together to get up there and qualify in P4. And I thought, well, okay, maybe he's found it on Saturday, but then come on Sunday, he couldn't hold the Mercs off.
Right.
Not sure what he was struggling with, apart from really struggling, he said, with his tire management. Just really couldn't.
And that's unknown for Perez, right? I mean, that's his strong point was tire management.
Yeah. So that in itself, when he said, I really struggle with grip and the tire management, and I thought, that's very un-Sergio if you really consider that. But then the FIA, they had a glitch with the virtual safety car restart procedure. That caught him off guard, allowed George to mug him at that point for a podium, and then trying to get back around. I thought maybe if there was another lap or two, he may have, but just, yeah, tough weekend for Sergio.
Yeah, it was. I mean, time management, I think it's really just getting the bounce in the car. He just never looked comfortable. It's not just about managing his tires. I think it's getting the balance right so he actually had pace, I think, more than anything. And, we all have off days. I think this was an off weekend for Sergio. I'm trying to think, is this a track that Sergio should not be good at? And I don't think it is. It's not, like some circuits, we know some people are better than others. I don't think there's anything glaring in this track that speaks, Sergio's, it's not really, an attacking track. It's not this kind of track. But,
yeah, right.
So, I don't understand it. Sergio knows better than us what it is.
Yeah.
I was actually talking to my cousin Andrew about this track. And obviously, a lot of people don't like Paul Ricard. I mean, the visuals are terrible. Yeah. But are the corners terrible? I'm not sure. I've been biased just because of the visuals that the track gives you versus, what if you painted all the blue and grass there? Would some of these corners be more epic than we see them as right now? Obviously, we see the runoffs. The runoffs go for miles. You can do no wrong unless you're Charles Leclerc. But I don't know. I mean, it's got its challenges.
Yeah, it does.
I said it's my least favorite track on the calendar, but I saw some things in the track that I found actually kind of challenging if you just get rid of that visuals that for some reason they're sticking with.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed the race. I thought it was a pretty good race.
And, it was definitely a good race. Yeah.
The bump was kind of interesting, watching that right wheel come off the ground. And where they chose to try to mitigate that bump. What is it? Turn 3-4 complex, whatever that was.
Yeah,
it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton ends up in P2, George Russell in P3. Mercedes had their first double podium this season. That's great for them. And despite still being, I'm guessing, I could be off, but I kind of feel like they're still 6-7 tenths behind the front runners. Huh? Yeah, it's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think they're a bit closer than that, but they're definitely not close enough.
Yeah. They qualified very well, I thought. They really did kind of recover on Saturday to get up there. And at that point, qualifying and fourth, fifth, or wherever they were, really basically waiting for any sort of attrition ahead of them, anything to happen, and they could pick off a podium, which they did. And because of Ferrari's issues. So Lewis and Sergio's issues. So Lewis looked, I thought, very good. All weekend, really wrung the neck in qualifying, got up in there in the mix, waiting for something to happen. It did. I kind of wonder if that virtual safety car towards the end was a full safety car. I'm kind of curious, given Lewis's pace, if Max had enough tires to hold him off. I don't know.
I think he would have, but yeah,
it's
a nice thought. I still think Max had pace in hand over there now.
He probably did in the long run. That long, their straight line speed probably would have held it off. But P2 is a great result anyway. Really does seem to elevate Lewis. Lewis is really excited about that. In his mindset.
Most excited we've heard him about second place in a long time. Right?
Yeah, no doubt. And a happy Lewis is a fast Lewis, right? So, so that's it was really good. A good drive, didn't put a foot wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it's more that he's seeing light at the end of the tunnel rather than the result in itself. I think that he's seeing progress and qualifying and the race results, just getting that little bit closer to everybody.
Yeah, for sure. George had a little harder day of it, though. He lost that spot to Alonso at the start. He did get it back. Got back around Fernando, and then had that battle with Perez. Had Perez in his sights for a long time, and the two had some good battles back and forth. Some high emotions, some whining coming from George. Some
a lot of whining.
Some whining from Perez about George cutting corners and jumping the restart.
I didn't see any of that cutting. Did you?
No, I didn't.
I'm sorry. It's like I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, he's throwing everything at it, I think.
Right. Yeah, I didn't see that either.
Desperation.
Yeah, right. But it was a good battle. I thought it was a lot of fun to watch,
It
despite the
was.
whining and moaning. But a great result from Mercedes. Team needs it. Despite some suggesting they were going to have the pace to win in France, that wasn't going to happen. But I do think, in aggregate, though, I do think the team's got to feel pretty positive coming out of the weekend. At least their development's heading in the right direction. Lewis seems to be reinvigorated a little about that, so that's
Yeah.
good. And I think there's a lot of positive to take away from Mercedes.
Yeah, I think Lewis is getting his groove back, and he's enjoying not being second fiddle to Russell anymore right
Yeah,
now.
right.
Yeah, Russell, qualifying and the race, last couple of races,
Yeah.
Lewis is back where he thinks he belongs or should belong.
Yeah.
But Russell, I thought Russell had, he had an entertaining race. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I think probably the best part of the race was him holding off Sainz when he shouldn't have, basically.
Right.
Sainz had quite an advantage to seeing that, but he held him off for a lot longer, which kind of scuppered a lot of Sainz's plans, quite honestly, because if he'd have got by Russell quickly, he may have been a lot closer to them at the end of the race when he did come in to do that other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I kind of felt like Lewis is kind of maybe at that point where he's reaching détente with his car a little bit, so we'll see how that goes. Well, let's talk about Ferrari and Sainz. Yeah. So Charles Leclerc DNF, Carlos Sainz in P5. Charles seemed to have things in hand, and that sentiment that Ferrari would quickly wear out their tires and be really hard on the tires, that didn't quite seem to pan out early on. Red Bull didn't seem to be... or at least Ferrari's tire wear and degradation didn't really seem to play out early on, or at least quite as in dramatic fashion as it has earlier in the season. However, I think, again, I kind of feel like I was watching that closely. I know the undercut was going to be strong there. And I'm kind of thinking that maybe had it played out, you kind of felt like Ferrari had this in hand. I kind of felt like... I don't know. I feel like the undercut was going to work because Charles had to go to mediums. Max was on hards, had that straight line pace, probably was going to hold him back. I don't know. I would have loved to have seen that pan out. But unfortunately, it didn't really work out, because I feel like Max may have even tried a two-stopper because he had those two mediums, but I'm not sure how that would have worked out. It doesn't really matter. In the end, Charles threw it away, made that error at Labuschagne. And, very magnanimous guy, very hard on himself. He said, totally my fault, my error. And he's basically saying, look, if I'm going to continue making these, I have no business sitting here talking about the championship or even thinking about it, because if I'm going to do this.
Yeah, it's a shame. We don't want to see him so down in the dumps. Yeah, it's great that, he's admitting to his mistake, but he needs to button it up and not make those kind of mistakes. I mean, I think it was the undercut and all that going on was putting pressure on him, even though he was driving solo, and he obviously just overdrove it into that corner, and the rear end just snapped on him, and that was it. I mean, you could just see how much speed he was throwing into that entry at that point on those tires at that moment. So it just didn't work out, and he needs to calm down a little bit, and they're both the team and himself throwing a lot of points Red Bull's way. They've got no chance if they do it again, literally. The Red Bull team and Max Verstappen are not going to let that deficit dwindle down. So they need to, I think they had a bit of an advantage here. They need to keep coming to every race with a bit of an advantage, but they need to execute as well, obviously.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, I agree. Or you're gonna have a lot of people saying, "I don't. Did Red Bull really win the championship, or did Ferrari throw it away?" Right. At that point. So Carlos, he started at the back of the grid. He had those engine change penalties, so that started in the back grid, left and coming through the entire field. But the team had some confusing radio discussions with him about when to box, and one of them. Was while he was passing Perez.
Yeah, it's hard to know though, because they do delay those.
They do delay it. Yeah,
I'm not sure if that was right or not right.
I read a comment from. Because I know those radio messages are delayed.
Yeah.
When it was on the actual coverage, he was literally next to Perez.
Yeah.
I think it was delayed a little bit, but even Carlos said it was while I think he was trying to pass. So I do think it came to him while he was setting Perez up, right?
Yeah, yeah. Although, you know, for Ferrari's side, basically he'd already thrown away the chance of passing Perez. He said, "I can't do it, so we're going to pit." Right.
Yes.
So I mean, I don't blame Ferrari 100% for calling that out, because that was the plan that Carlos had agreed to, and then all of a sudden Carlos figured out a way of getting by,
right?
And then was like, no, not yet, not yet.
Yeah.
So he's, you know, he was as wishy-washy as they were in calling the strategy on when to talk, etc.
I agree. I read a lot of stuff, you know, hammering on the team, which rightfully there is some criticism to be meted out, but Carlos had agreed with the team, and he was saying, well, then we need to box now, right?
Right.
So the team are working on it, right?
Yeah, and they said, don't box yet, because they wanted to reevaluate it, you know. And then when they did say, okay, box, you know, it's like, no, not now. You know, so
right.
It's, it's like the kids, you know, they're having a horrible time. I want to go home. And then we'll suddenly meet a friend. I don't want to go home. Don't make me go home. Yeah. So it's, and the call has been criticized because of where he ended up, etc. But we don't know how much tire wear they were having, if there was an issue. I mean, how stupid would it be if they could have boxed and yet all of a sudden he's got a flat tire and he gets 0 points? Consolidation wise, where he was at, maybe he could have got 3rd place, maybe, but he still had that. He already had that 5-second penalty hanging over his head. So I don't think really he was going to get much further. Maybe he could have finished 4th, but this way he was guaranteed a 5th. And I think that's the option that Ferrari went through. And as I said, we don't know what their tire wear is like. So
he had blisters on his tires.
It could have been a non-choice. Right. You have to pit. I'm sorry. It's, you know, yes, you're still getting speed out of that car, but these tires are not going to finish. So we have to do something. I
think that's what Mattia said. You know, he said he's confident. No, he's confident they made because they have the data and the tires. He didn't think he were going to hold up. They didn't think he had the tires to hold on to 3rd. Bottom line is. And, you know, if you look a few laps before that, there's clear blisters on those fronts.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't know. Like you said, there could have been some concern over safety. Look, at this point with Charles out of the race, I don't think Ferrari was in a gambling mood. I really don't.
Yeah.
And I think at that point they said, look, we're not going to gamble it. The bottom line is we're going to play it safe. We're going to box him. He'll come back out, fresh tires, fresh mediums. He'll secure 5th. We think he can do it, and he'll get the fastest lap. We'll take the point. Right. I think ultimately that's the way to look. Now, you can criticize it, which I would also add, Paul, the whole radio call saying, well, no, you've got a stop and go penalty. And he was like, no, it's not a stop and go. It's a 5 seconds. Like, you know, dude, the team should know whether that was a stop and go or just an add-on penalty. The team should know that, you know? So for them to call out, he's got to stop and go, I thought was BS. They should know that.
Big error. Yeah, they do know it. And it was they knew there really isn't how often have you seen a stop and go in Formula One?
Yeah.
It's not even a penalty that anyone ever uses. So it was just a misquote by the person. It wasn't really what they was thinking. It just kind of came out that way.
Yeah, probably did. So, you know, look, you could, if you were I know there's a lot of couch strategists. I'm one of them. And if it was me, I'd like to say just gut reaction. I probably would have left him out and rolled the dice. Mm-hmm. But I don't have any of the data, you know, and having all that data, looking at the tire temperatures, the tire pressures, the tire, you know, the lap times, everything in aggregate, I think they made that call, probably not in a big gambling mood, wanted to get one of the cars home in the points, didn't need a second DNF. So draw your conclusions. Let's talk about Alpine. Fernando Alonso, P6, Esteban Ocon, P8. Alpine struggled on Saturday, but they did come alive a little on Sunday. Their long-run pace certainly paid dividends. Fernando held Lando's McLaren behind him, finishing in a P6, a great result. Not, you know, there wasn't a lot of camera time on it, but I thought it was a hell of a run back to P6.
Yeah, no, Alonso's been... Yeah. I've loved his racing this year. I mean... I hate it. Even on the commentary, they say, "Oh well, still life left in the old dog." It's like life has never left this guy, man.
No.
He's on it, and he's clever, and he's cool. Where they're saying, we need more pace because the McLaren's catching. Oh yeah, no, I'm keeping them there so they'll destroy the tires and make my life easy.
It's
like the guy knows.
He knows what he's talking about.
He would be a heck of a guy to call strategy, honestly. But
he would.
That would be a waste because he's a huge talent in the cast.
Yeah, they always kind of, you're right. Oh, it's the old life and the old dog. Well, wait a minute. Right before he came back to F1, he was winning Le Mans. You know, it's not like he was sitting at home smoking his pipe, with his feet up and losing his touch.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, there's no talent going away there.
No.
When you get to that age, it's more, do you still have the hunger? And I think just Alonso just doesn't give up on that.
Well, you could juxtapose, look at Alonso and the tenacity at which he's going at it every weekend versus Seb.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of a difference there.
Very
different there, folks.
Very different,
Yeah. Ocon hit Tsunoda early on, was given a 5-second penalty, recovered from that. He served that penalty, recovered that, managed to bring it home, up in the points in P8. His home race, that was good. He was very pleased with that. So a dual points finish again for Alpine, moving in the right direction, and certainly in the hands of Alonso. P6 is about where that car probably is, maybe P7.
Yeah, which is good for them.
Yeah.
We still want more out of a factory team.
Totally. Yep.
They're ahead of McLaren right now.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not just a one-off. They've started to show that maybe they're consistently, McLaren is struggling just a little bit. They've lost their edge a little bit, and Alpine have just kind of raised their game a little bit, and that's just where those two teams have kind of shifted their position in the grid and in the results.
Well, speaking of McLaren, Lando Norris in P7, Ricciardo P9, McLaren had several upgrades they brought this weekend. Seemed to do well, I think. Lando lost a position at the start to Alonso, never managed to get that back, and then he lost out to Russell and Sainz, arguably in faster cars. I get it. As they came back through the field. So, I think the upgrades, they may have worked. I don't know that this track really flattered that car, but I think Lando was given it all he had. For sure.
Yeah. It's tough. The McLaren seems a bit more finicky, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
As we saw at the beginning of the year, we saw it have massive issue, and then that massive issue kind of went away depending on what the track was, and then they eventually got rid of the real monkey that was on the back, but it still seems a bit of a temperamental beast that they're trying to get a hold of.
Yeah, it does. And it seems very hot and cold, depending on the track, Yeah,
which may be where Ricciardo's having struggles.
Yeah, well, he seemed basically tucked in behind Alonso for a good portion of the race, but then, the Alpines came and he couldn't hold that off, couldn't hold Ocon off. It was interesting. Dan was interviewed by Ted Kravitz, and he likened what he was going through a bit like, having a dance partner, and you're both not dancing the same dance. You're both a partner, but you're not dancing. I think that's a neat analogy. I get it. I understand what he's saying. I'm kind of wondering after a couple of years though if he shouldn't have learned the dance by now.
Right. Yeah. Well, he should have.
Yeah.
He absolutely should have. He needs to figure it out.
If the car's going to dance that way, you're going to have to learn that dance to some point.
I mean, we know he's a very extremely good driver.
Oh yeah.
On the day, and maybe there's a certain type of car that he flourishes in, and both the Alpine that he team that he came from and McLaren, maybe they don't jive with that, and maybe the car flattered, or that marriage of the Red Bull and Ricciardo were just the perfect deal for him to maximize his potential and go somewhere else. I'm not calling him average, but he's not looking, his teammates kind of consistently kicking his butt right now.
Yeah, he is. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P10, Sebastian Vettel, P11. Lance had a great start, Paul, gained 5 places all the way up to 10th, and then really defended that position through all the pit stops, the safety cars, the virtual safety cars. Even his teammate tried to take it from him, and he held on.
That was the close thing at the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, kind of brake checked him a little there, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, held on to it. Well done, Lance, finishing in the point with P10.
Yeah, in Aston Martin's 100th year in Grand Prix racing.
Yes.
Huh?
How about
What?
that? Huh?
I'm pretty sure they haven't had 100 years in Grand Prix racing. They may have did it 100 years ago, but it was a big.
Yeah.
I don't like that stuff.
Yeah, it's
It's
a
like
little fuzzy
literally,
math.
yeah, because Mercedes did it too. If you
Yes.
remember, what okay, yeah, but you were out of it for like 50 years. I don't think that really counts.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of
you
like,
were out of it after you killed those 80 people at Le Mans.
yeah,
You're pretty
yeah.
much out of it.
It's like, like India. I don't know how many hundreds India's had. It's the 100th running of. It's the 100th year. It's the
Yeah.
100th liter ever burned. And
Yeah.
it's. I think it was a bit of a false festive time for Aston Martin, because
Yeah.
they really haven't been racing.
There's
Formula
only
One
one
for a long
team you
time.
can really say that about. That's Ferrari.
That is Ferrari.
They
They're the
have
only
been
team
in
that's been
every
here.
single one since the modern
Exactly,
era.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was a bit weird when they kept bringing that up. So
Yeah.
that's pretty weak.
Everybody would love to have that pedigree that Ferrari have, but
Yeah.
only Ferrari has.
They obviously found a coupon at the Carvel ice cream store and decided to make an event out of it. Yeah.
Right. Let's see. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, P12, Yuki Tsunoda, DNF. Yuki got punted by Ocon early on. That put him at the back,
Really?
and then he later retired due to too much damage. Now this is going to come as a little bit of a surprise to all of you. He was really pissed off. He was not happy with just a 5-second penalty for Ocon.
Yeah.
He felt he completely ruined his race, which I actually would agree with Yuki.
I would too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ocon got a little aggressive there, Paul. But
Yeah, I think.
I don't know. How'd you see it?
Well, I think the penalties are definitely not varied enough for the intensity of the mistake. But we always wanted to avoid the penalty for the outcome rather than what the deal was. But
it is what it is, Yuki.
But it is very tough for a driver to know that he's all the way at the back of the pack, and whoever did it to him is actually just going to tough to swallow.
It is hard. Yeah. Pierre Gasly run just out of the side of the points in 12th. He ran off track, lost 3 places. But thanks to some attrition ahead of him, he gained those positions back. That made mom and dad very happy, and they were in the garage in attendance for his home race. And you have to like all the Pierre flags and signage. And I was wondering, why didn't Esteban use Pierre's marketing agency? That was impressive, all those number 10 Pierre flags flying around. Huh?
Yeah, his mum was very excited about that pass.
Yeah,
I don't know what she gets when he's up front, but yeah.
Yeah, imagine the race he won when he won the Monza. She must have been just beside herself.
Just beside herself. But not a great weekend for AlphaTauri. They've seemed to be kind of like another team, Alfa Romeo, kind of slipping back into mediocrity.
Mediocrity. Their meteoric rise to mediocrity. Yes. That brings us to Williams. Alex Albon, P13, Nicholas Latifi. Now, this may come as a bit of a surprise. A DNF, not necessarily of his making, but we'll get Paul's take on it. First, Alex. Alex had a decent race. And okay, he wasn't, on for the points, and there was a little attrition ahead of him. But I do think he is kind of gelling with the upgrades in that car. Does seem to be making some advancement with those upgrades. Feels like the car is more drivable to him, and I think that's all a good sign. I think Alex in that car with some upgrades that he's comfortable with and working, that kind of means that Williams could be pecking off some point, a 10th place here or there, given the race or the track. So I think that's a good sign for Alex.
Yeah, it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 back for them.
Yeah.
And depending on the weekend, but he definitely is getting a lot out of the car, and he's being punchy with it, very much like, maybe not successfully but very much like what Russell did in that car, putting it in a position. And when you got the backdrop of your teammate Latifi, who's basically just like sweeping the back of the grid every weekend, it just shows you, that he's actually performing quite high.
Yeah. Well, Latifi had that tangle with Magnussen. This left him damaged, running wide, and then the team decided to retire the car. I think the team thought, having Nicholas out there running is one thing, running outside of the points is one thing, but then having a damaged car and running, that's just putting mileage on the car. We're just going to park it. There's no point. It's not like he's going to claw back to the points at this, we'll just park it and save the engine for next week.
Exactly. What is the point?
Yeah.
There isn't. No.
Yeah. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, and P14, Zhou Guanyu, a bit of a ragged weekend for him at DNF. Zhou clipped Schumacher into a spin at the safety car restart. That wasn't very glowing. And then that prompted a box for a new front wing and a 5-second penalty, which he did serve, but he later stopped on track and brought out the virtual safety car, which screwed Perez's race. So way to go, Joe. Look, not too hard. I think he's had a hell of a year so far. I think he's acquitted himself very well. Bit of a ragged weekend for him, but I think he's done well so far.
Yeah, I mean, overall, obviously, you see Bottas in P14, and he was in top 5 at the beginning of the year. So that team, as I said, just like AlphaTauri, are struggling there a little bit. And that makes drivers try and do things that maybe they shouldn't be trying because they're just trying to get something to happen.
Right. Trying a little too much, maybe. Valtteri started on the hards, and the safety car was out pretty early, so he decided not to stop. Thought that was going to be a little too early. Stayed out longer, but just didn't have the pace they were expecting from the car really all weekend. He said they were hoping for a lot more. Stopped a second time, trying to find some pace on those mediums. Did say the mediums were better, but at that point he was back in P14. Not a good race for him either.
No, not so much.
Let's see. Finally, you got Haas, Mick Schumacher down in P15, and Kevin Magnussen at DNF. The shine has certainly worn off the Haas there at Paul Ricard. Just wasn't their kind of track. Didn't stop Kevin, though.
Yeah, Kevin was doing
Kevin stormed off at the beginning, was up in P12, looking good there. The team brought both cars in early, though. And then they lost out to that safety car. You can't, who knew, right? And that kind of put paid to their strategy. So that left him in the back trying to recover. I think Kevin, fighting Latifi, was just really trying to come back through and try to salvage something out of it. Didn't really work for him. And then Schumacher getting spun by Joe, that didn't help things. That put him in the back. So really a little hard to be down on Haas. I just think circumstances put him there.
Yeah, I think it was actually a better car than the Alfa, the Williams, or the AlphaTauri this weekend.
I do too.
But the result just didn't show it. Magnussen, obviously, in qualifying was, performing very high. I think that the potential of the car was great. So it just didn't happen for him. Yeah,
it wasn't like they just were out to lunch and trundling around. I think circumstances kind of put him there. Yeah, unfortunately. So, all right, let's give out some awards. First award of the race is always Move the Race. Woo! All right, Paul, who do you have move the race?
Move of the race. I'm going to go with, what am I going to go with? Sainz on Perez.
Yes. That was a good move.
Yeah, he made a lot of good moves, but that one was, he just didn't give up. And even with his team screaming at him at a completely wrong place that we don't actually know if that really was the case. It was nice. It was nice just trying to pass someone on the outside. And he didn't have new tires. He was still on the old mediums at that point. So it was still a great move.
I'm going to stir what our Kentian friends might call controversy. Ooh. I'm going to say that I think Carlos Sainz, had he not had to have that engine penalty, I think he may have been the guy for the weekend. I think he looked fantastic all weekend.
Yeah, I mean,
very fast.
The team messed up. Reliability wasn't in his favor, but he didn't make any mistakes.
No, he had a great recovery drive, put some great passes out there. Let's see, I'll go with Russell. I thought Russell had some good passing attempts, hustling back up. Look, he probably enjoyed beating Lewis in the first half of the season. I think he's probably had a bum full of Lewis beating him. I think he's hustling, buddy. Lewis, he good to learn by. Give him to the middle. I don't think he likes being behind Lewis any more than Lewis likes being behind him. And I think he was fighting hard to get back up there and did a pretty good job. Had a really good pass. Put some pass on Perez. And look, FIA virtual safety car hiccup or not, you got to be ready to go. George was on it. And so anyway.
Yeah, that was an interesting where the timelines are to make sure you're there. And he was ebbing and flowing a little bit. playing a little cat and mouse.
Yeah.
With Perez and keeping him guessing. So that was pretty smart.
Yeah, it was. It was a smart move.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next word's donkey of the race.
We'll do it live.
Oh boy, Paul. Donkey of the race. You go with.
Now I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Is it Leviosa or Leviosa? Because I think someone said it wrong, and instantly Charles Leclerc was in the barriers.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a connection there somewhere between Harry Potter and Charles Leclerc's.
I think so.
Downside there, yeah. It just popped in my head when it was Leviosa. So anyway,
she's
Charles
mental.
Gets it. Charles gets it.
Yeah.
You can't throw away a race win, especially even if you're pushing hard. No pressure from behind, just pressure in your head.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I give it to Charles. I just think, dude. And, now there's a lot of, he's a bit of a crasher. He's a crasher.
Mm-hmm.
He's a bit of a crasher, isn't he?
Yeah, that is something he needs to give up quick.
Yeah, just young man can't handle the pressure, not like Lewis can. So, yes. I remember Lewis running wide in China. Lewis has had his moments. I remember Max having many moments, being accused of being a first lap nutter, right? They all go through that kind of thing, but Charles has been doing it a while. Got to shake it off. He's been doing it a while.
Yeah, I keep thinking he's kind of new, but he's got 19 poles. He's got as many poles as Max. He's been at it for a while now, and
he's been there long enough not to do that. I think.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. All right, finally is drive of the race. Good God. All right, Paul. Drive of the race. Who did you get? I'm gonna.
Who did I get? Did I go with?
Did you go with Lewis? No, you went with Sainz.
I went with Sainz.
Yes. Yeah.
We talked about this before the podcast, but I've still got all the names that I written of potential ones. I said I'm not picking Russell because of his whining, so it was between Alonso and Sainz, and I'm giving Sainz once again because he did nothing wrong this weekend. His team or the car itself made the errors.
Yeah, I agreed. I went with Alonso. I thought Alonso had a great race.
Fantastic.
Up to P6, so that was good. Let's do some mailbag, shall we?
You've got mail.
Okay.
We'll try to get that squeezed in before your internet connection dies.
Top
there.
10 facts about Kent.
Yeah, the top 10 facts, the places to visit while in Kent. Yes. Let's see. John asked, the question is for Paul.
Oh.
A group of us are going to Nashville Indy Race, and I saw that Heart of Racing will also be there that weekend. Yes. My question is, how much access do fans get to the behind the scenes of the team stuff? It's my wife and I's first live race ever. Mm-hmm. And will you be there for the race? Thanks for all you do, all three of you, for the podcast. It's always the highlight of my week when a new episode drops. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate that very much. Paul, will you be in Nashville?
I will not be in Nashville. That is like the busiest week end of our year, basically, because we've got the GT4 car racing in Nashville. We've got the GT3 cars racing at Elkhart Lake, and then we've got the drift car racing in Seattle. So we've kind of stretched a little, not thin, but...
Are you going to Elkhart?
So I'm going to Elkhart, yeah.
Gotcha.
Ian's going to be going back and forth between the two, but... I'm going to be in Elkhart, unfortunately. Because if I was in Nashville, I would give, as I try to do, if anyone comes up and says hi to us, I give them the tour. I pull them in the trailer. I let them see all the stuff going on. Let them take some pictures. Push a few buttons.
That's right.
So
if you're going to Elkhart, find Paul, and you'll get that.
Yeah. So.
So how is the access down there for John and his wife?
Yeah, usually good. they get to look around, get real close to the cars, and certainly the Heart of Racing team and a lot of the other teams are very amenable to answering questions, letting you look close, etc. You've always just don't tread on the really expensive bodywork.
Yeah.
But a lot of the teams, they're more than happy to show. I see them all the time. Teams, little kids are coming up and they're putting them in the driver's seat and everything. That's the great thing and different thing about probably American racing versus European racing is a lot more. They allow the fans into the paddocks a lot more, and the teams are a lot more open to, kind of showing everybody what it's all about. So,
yeah. Very cool. Well, that's awesome, John. I hope you enjoy it. Let us know how it goes. Tag us in some tweets or something. Show us some pics, man.
Yeah.
That'll be cool. That'll be awesome. Let's see. Mike asked, Todd, loved the pin article you wrote about sport comparisons. So great question for the awesome Paul. And you are awesome, Paul. You're in Kent.
Thank you.
And you with the backdrop for new F1 fans, how would you explain new folks seeing F1 drivers who were midfield at best in F1 come to IndyCar and do a lot better? What makes F1 so much more demanding as is a new fan sees open wheel racing and it appears similar to them. Mm-hmm. And he was wanting to know what makes it more demanding.
I don't know as it is. And I'm not, because the equipment is always a big factor. And, in IndyCar right now, we've got Roman Grosjean, Max Ericsson's leading the championship, but he never had a car that he could win a championship in.
Right, let alone Indy.
I will admit, I'm surprised at how well he's doing.
I'm not.
It's hard to judge. It's hard to judge a driver when he's driving inferior equipment. But when he was driving that Caterham, they got points, right? He was the first guy that scored points for them. Yeah. I mean, there were signs of it there, but Ericsson's making a hell of a run this year and consistently running in top 5. So
he's a good driver.
He's a good driver, yeah, but Grosjean is not. Grosjean is, I think Grosjean's a good driver, but he's not coming in and and taking names right now. He's like, and I'm not even sure he was in top 10 of points. So, and he had a lot more success in Formula One than Ericsson. So, generally, when you see people come from Europe, Formula car racing, and get in IndyCar, they have a certain style that they bring with them, aggressive style. When they've been around a few years, they kind of water that down, tone that down a little bit, because the paddock works a whole lot differently in IndyCar than it does in Formula One, where it's just mano a mano against each other. IndyCar, even though it's very competitive, it is still a bit more friendly, a little bit more of a family atmosphere, even in between teams, as well as just inside a team. Right.
So it's kind of driving is driving in that sense. I do think it's they do tend to do well, but it's well, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't get to Formula One because they were horrible drivers.
No.
And yes, some drivers never made it from IndyCar to Formula One who were probably deserved a shot to race in Formula One, but not everyone gets a shot. It's a very limited amount of seats in there, and even though there could be 60 drivers that could perform well in Formula One, there isn't 60 cars out there, so some people just don't get that opportunity to do it.
Would it be fair to say that because there's so many limited seats in Formula One, we really are sort of skimming the very top cream of talent for F1? Whereas there's more seats, more opportunity, more ways maybe into IndyCar. So maybe the talent level slightly different?
See, I mean, the problem is, I think, with 20 cars in Formula One, and we know that some drivers are there because not necessarily all about their talent, paying, right? So if you have more cars in there, those people will still be there, but it does open a couple more competitive seats for drivers that are there purely on skill alone. So I think it's less. I think because the grid is so limited, you actually be missing out on the cream of the crop because of the lack of opportunities, rather than making sure the very bests are there.
Because I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate there, but because I mean, I've met a lot of the IndyCar drivers. I think they're all hell of a drivers. They're fantastic drivers. But so let's see. Final question from F1 Lump. He says, I know this is a question that could take an entire segment of the podcast. You're right. So do what you want with it. Like me, speaking of me, I'm a Ferrari fan. What do we do with this strategy team? Am I missing something? Can it be as bad as it looks every weekend? He says you have as many connections to the team as anyone I know. So what gives? It's a really good question. You're right. We could spend a lot of time on this. Have been critical of Ferrari as a Ferrari fan. Everybody knows I'm a Ferrari fan, but nobody. I mean, I can be pretty hard on my own team. I try to be, and I try to be as balanced as I can on the podcast. I think, in fairness to them, I think saying that he had a stop and go penalty, that's bad. I think they could sharpen their pencils a little bit on the strategy side. I do. Not necessarily in the strategy and plans like plan A, plan B, plan C that they head into the race with. I think they know where their car's weaknesses are, and they're trying to come up with plans to capitalize on their strengths and marginalize their weaknesses. But there's a lot of factors when you're doing that. And Paul knows this far, far better than I do because he does it every weekend at Art of the Racing. But in their defense, and when you look at this weekend alone, they had to factor Carlos's hard compounds at the start, which would be slightly slower off the start, but they have to factor in those. They have to factor in that they have two medium compounds remaining. Is it a 1 or 2 stop strategy? What Red Bull is doing with both of their drivers as he recovered through the field. What Mercedes is doing with both of their drivers as Carlos is recovering through the field. They had to factor in the safety car, the virtual safety car, the tire wear rate, tire degradation rate, if any, or either. He was experiencing with his medium compound. He had the blisters on at the very end. They have to factor in a lot of things, and that's all before the race. They have to factor a lot of that in, but you've also got to factor everything in real time, right? Because everything changes in real time. Red Bull did the undercut. Do they cover Perez? Do they cover Max? Who do they cover? Are they covering really Russell? Or are they covering Perez? Do they think Carlos can get back? There's just a lot that goes into this, and it just goes to show you how amazingly talented these strategy teams for all the F1 teams.
Yeah, I mean, but I'll say something against that is that you need to be prepared for the scenarios so that you don't have time to make a decision like that and go through all these permutations. You have to already have the answer before that situation occurs. Right. And we didn't really talk about it, but why did he get that 5-second penalty?
Yeah, unsafe release. Right.
Why was he an unsafe release? Because they panicked.
Yes.
In the pit stop, and they didn't have a plan to release the car.
Right.
Literally, the guy put the gun back on, and the car came down, and just everyone jumped out of the way, and the car's going. Yeah. There wasn't anyone controlling that car at that point. Right. And that, I think, it was probably the biggest mistake they made the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Was not being in control of that car in the pit stop, because that ended up putting him on his back foot. Right. I agree that Carlos starting in the back meant it was 1 versus 2 up front, always makes it hard. If you have a second car backing you up, that lessens the options that the other team can try.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of different, and you're right, Paul. You have to factor these permutations and different alternate scenarios to the best of your ability before the race. And I agree. It's kind
of like we talked about when I interviewed Alan Nish, and we've talked about it a lot, is visualizing turn 1 at the start of the race. You don't just visualize one thing. You visualize 10 different starts.
Yeah.
Where am I? What am I going to do with that situation? Right. So that hopefully, and there's an infinite amount of things that can happen, but hopefully one of those is going to be close to where you actually end up at the start, and you've got a plan for it already before you get there.
Right. I would say that Ferrari would never say anything about it publicly, but I do think Ferrari are probably trying to take a long look at their strategy and what they're doing. They're silly not to.
It's definitely not a smooth operation.
No, it's not. and they do need to take a long look at how their strategy comes about, how they're calculating their strategies, and what they're doing there. Because at the end of the day, you're Ferrari and you're up against Red Bull and Mercedes. And I can tell you unequivocally, if you aren't at 10 tenths on your strategy, you're going to lose against Mercedes and Red Bull. They have it down. Mercedes, wonderful strategy. Red Bull, wonderful strategy. So that's what you're up against, and you've got to bring your A game on that. I would say they're not firing on their A game. I think there's enough incidents this year to suggest they're not.
Yeah, and if they have to make changes, there's always still a rebuilding of the process.
It's not an instant fix.
No, it's not like, oh, we put Harold and Sarah in here when we'll switch their positions. No, once you bring in new personnel or new ideals, there's always, like designing a car, there's always a process to fine tune it to where it can be its maximum point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's not an instant fix, and it's a development over time and a trust. And sometimes you don't get it right. Mercedes, very clearly, there's been times they didn't get it right. You know, everybody's like, oh my gosh, what's James Vowles doing? Well, you know, he missed it, you know, and it happens. But it can't happen on a regular basis. And thankfully to Mercedes, it doesn't. And it doesn't really a lot. It does at Red Bull, but not with frequency, right? But I think Ferrari, they've had a few this season that are eyebrow raising. And I'm not casting aspersions on Laurent Mekies or anyone. I'm just saying that I think it's something Mattia's got to take a long look at for sure. Yep. All right. Well, that's what we think about the race. But what do you think about the race? You can tell us if you go to theparcferme.com and share your comments in the post for this podcast, and do it with decorum and civility as always. If you like the podcast, go over to iTunes, give us a lot of love, give us a good ratings over there, and a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters, because we could not and would not do this podcast if it wasn't for you. So find us Patreon supporter, pat them on the back and tell them thank you, because it's because of them that you are downloading this podcast. So Paul, it has been awesome. I can't wait. Next weekend is the Hungaroring, the Hungarian Grand Prix. I can't wait for that, because that's always fun. Can't wait to see how you do at Spa. I'm not even sure if you'll be around. Are you still going to be there to do the race review of Hungary?
Is Hungary next weekend?
It is next weekend.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be tough. No, maybe not.
I may have to do a race review by myself.
Yes, one hand clapping.
Yay. Good. Well, best of luck at Spa.
Yeah.
And bring home a trophy and show
that's
those Europeans how you do it.
Yeah, we'll see.
You got a lot of stiff competition.
For
so
sure.
Anyway, all right. Well, until next week, folks, when we do this all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.